Oral questions by members.
Member for West Vancouver Capilano.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Up and down. We've all watched with horror the unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, and people across the province have attended rallies and actions in solidarity with its people. All British Columbians want to ensure that we are providing no comfort, no aid to Putin and his authoritarian regime. Halting the import and sale of Russian liquor products was a positive step, but we must continue to do whatever we can in British Columbia. This afternoon, the Government Pension Fund confirmed they continue to hold hundreds of millions of dollars of Russian state-owned corporations, and they have no plan to divest. So my question is to the Premier. Does he support this decision?
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I thank very much the member's question. It has been a traumatizing time for all citizens of the world. The events unfolding in Central Europe between the government of Russia and the people of Ukraine are appalling and unacceptable by any measure. And it is one of those rare occasions when all 87 of us stand united in that regard. With respect to steps that we can take, we have already through suggestions from the other side, again, working collaboratively to find a way where we can, with common purpose, send a clear message from British Columbia to Russia, have suspended the sale of Russian products within our government liquor stores. We've also put $1 million in play and encouraging people to make contributions to the Red Cross so that we can assist people in real time. I would also recommend, if those people do have disposable income, that they look at the UN High Commission on Refugees. We are going to have a refugee crisis in Europe, and we need to be part of that here in British Columbia. We welcome people from around the world to Canada and to British Columbia, and I have said very clearly to the Prime Minister and his team, whatever steps we can take to assist with sanctions, whatever steps we can take to assist with resettlement, we are there as a group, all of us together, and all British Columbians speaking with one voice. With respect to the BC investment vehicles, these are not directed by government. These are directed by trustees of pension funds. And those trustees would have heard and seen the horrors that are emerging from Ukraine, and I would hope that they would take their authority and direct the Finance Administration to take steps to divest. But it is not a call by government, but it is, I suggest, a call that British Columbians would want them to respond to. It's in the hands of those who make those decisions, and I'll leave it up to them to follow the ball and make the right choice.
Member for West Vancouver Capilano, supplemental.
Mr. Speaker, thank you to the Premier. The sale of vodka is largely a symbolic gesture, and we're looking for real action. The Minister does have a say, government does have a say in the overall investment management framework and eligible investments of the pension corporation. The Minister of Finance is the sole shareholder of the pension fund, and British Columbians are looking for transparency from this government. This is what we know. The inventory of holdings a year ago included over 100 million in shares of state-owned bank Smurbank, 84 million in Lukoil, 19 million in Gazprom, 32 million in Rosneft, which is the main supplier of oil for the Russian military. So again, to the Premier, does he support the public administration plan or the public pension plan holding investments in Russian state-owned enterprises?
Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Again, if the members on that side want a briefing on how BCIMC works, I know that I could get one from the member for Abbotsford West, the member for Prince George Mount Robson, Prince George McBride. Thank you, Mackenzie. Prince George Mackenzie. And perhaps then we could have a more detailed discussion about what role politicians should play in the management of pension funds, not on behalf of us, but on behalf of working people throughout the province. I agree with the member, and her inventory of those funds that BCIMC is invested in would not be choices I would make, certainly not today. But the trustees have the authority and the ability to manage those issues, and I'll leave it up to them to do that.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, thank you very much. And as we sit here today, a democratic country is being invaded. And I appreciate the offer of a briefing from the Premier, but I do know this, that the Premier and his government have the opportunity to set the mandate, to have a conversation about what the mandate looks like and what is acceptable. We're not suggesting that the Premier or the Minister are involved in specific transactions, but of course this government has a role to play. And I think there's something else all of us can agree on in this House, that no British Columbian wants their pension fund invested in fueling tanks and jets and artillery. That is unacceptable. We understand that there are protocols in place, but we also know that Europe has not seen an invasion of this severity since the Second World War. Extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. Other countries realize this. Norway's sovereign fund is divesting from Russia. Last week, Quebec's pension fund, Caisse de dépôt, sold their Russian-linked asset securities, saying, and I quote, "As from today and for the future, we decided to sell," end quote. The Canada Pension Plan Investment Board says it has no holdings. So will the Premier at least take the steps necessary to make sure the mandate is clear? That is clearly within his purview, and it is time that he took that step.
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And you'll get no quarrel from me, member. The events that are unfolding in Europe right now are unprecedented in our lifetimes, and it needs to be stopped. And a clear and united message from all Canadians has to go forward. The whole point of sanctions is not to divide us. It's to make with one voice a call to the international community to stand up to a brutal dictator. The federal government is primarily responsible for that, and I know all members will want to support the current government in every initiative that they put forward. With respect to how BCIMC manages its funds for its pensioners, I think reviewing the discussion today will be clear direction that this is not something that any of us believe, based on the clapping and based on the questions coming from the opposition and the responses, quite frankly, from my colleagues when we discussed this. This is something we would want them to act upon, but we would not want to interfere in a fund that is designed to protect trustees and pensioners. They have people elected to those positions that can make those calls, and I'm hopeful that they do.
Leader of the Official Opposition, supplemental.
Well, thank you very much, but the Premier, once again, misses the point. The Minister of Finance sets the mandate. The Minister of Finance actually sets the overall management framework and lays out eligible investments. And I don't think I need to repeat the fact that British Columbians do not want their pension funds fueling jets, tanks, and artillery. The Minister of Finance is the sole shareholder. She also appoints the chair, 2 of the directors who make up the board of directors, and she sets the mandate. Last week's budget devoted a significant number of pages to championing the values in ESG, environmental, social, and governance standards for investing. It is very hard to reconcile that while holding any investments in state-owned enterprises linked to Vladimir Putin. In light of the invasion of Ukraine, how does continuing to hold these investments fit with the social and governance standards that were touted by this Minister of Finance just last week?
Premier.
Well, again, thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I appreciate the enthusiasm with which the member puts the question, but it doesn't change the reality that we're living in, that those choices are made by people who are not in this House today. Have we made it clear? Certainly the Leader of the Opposition has made it clear by the force of her questioning, and I would hope that my response was equally forceful, that I would not make those investments were it my choice to make. There are trustees that are elected to protect the interests of pensioners, they make these choices. They would be aware of the debate. They would be aware of the international circumstances with which we are living right now, and I'm hopeful that they will make the right choice. Wishing it were so, like the member for Kamloops wants to do, is all well and good, but I don't believe it's our role to get and intervene in the return for pensioners across this province. Do I agree with the member's question? Absolutely, 100%.
Member for Saanich North and Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if what we're doing in question period here today is indicating to the trustees that this House is unanimous behind the call from the official opposition, then count the BC Green Caucus as making this House unanimous. This government shows their priorities, Mr. Speaker, in how they spend the money. In this budget, I'm looking to how this government is meaningfully advancing reconciliation. In Budget 2022, we finally see this government reorganizing how ministries interact through the Declaration Act Secretariat. However, the $4 million per year to create the Secretariat appears to be just enough money to administer and to pay the salaries of the staff that are in that Secretariat. So where is the priority in this budget for action on reconciliation? Last summer, the Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation published a 79-point action plan required in Section 4 of the Declaration Act. This action plan encompasses the work of every single one of the minister's colleagues. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation is responsible for his colleagues in Cabinet to deliver on our commitments that we made to Indigenous people over 2 years ago. Yet there doesn't appear to be any money in the budgets of the ministries for the actions laid out in the plan. So through you to the Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation, where's the money in this government's plan to finance progress on the DRIPA action plan?
Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to my colleague across the way for the question. We're very proud of the work that the Secretariat will do in implementing DRIPA, the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. We've appointed as Associate Deputy Minister Sisikyoks Jessica Wood to serve in that historic role, to lead the government's response to the alignment of our laws, both existing and new, with the Declaration commitments that are part of that act. We believe that the money to do that, Mr. Speaker, will be found in the mandate plans for each and every ministry and their actions going forward. The action plan to which the honourable member referred will be before this House within the next few weeks. We're very proud of the concrete actions of that action plan that will make tangible difference to the lives of Indigenous peoples across this province.
Member for Saanich North and Islands, supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his response. And I think that it's important to acknowledge that I also have an incredible amount of confidence in Jessica Wood in navigating the creation of the Declaration Act. Indigenous leaders like the Union of BC Indian Chiefs President, Grand Chief Stuart Phillip, have been critical of the provincial government's all talk and little action approach. Specifically, they've been calling for conservation financing, which would protect endangered species and build economic opportunities to logging endangered old-growth forests, Mr. Speaker. In Budget 2022, there does not appear to be any money set aside for conservation financing, even though last summer the federal government put more than $160 million on the table for Indigenous protected and conserved areas. This provincial government has asked First Nations to pause the logging of old-growth forests, but hasn't given them any funding to compensate their potential losses. Budget 2022 was an opportunity, a missed opportunity to fix that mistake. The first item in the new Minister of Lands, Water and Resource Stewardship's mandate letter is to, quote, develop a path forward with First Nations to build a co-managed land and resource management regime that will ensure natural resources are managed effectively into the future, end quote. My question, Mr. Speaker, is through you to the new Minister of Lands, Water and Resource Stewardship. Will she act on the first item in her mandate and secure the desperately needed funds for conservation as was requested by Indigenous leaders in British Columbia?
Minister of Land, Water and
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite for the question. First of all, let me say I am incredibly proud to be asked to lead this new ministry, one that I will be working with my colleagues, with industry, with First Nations, with communities to help transform the way we work with First Nations to seek environmental stewardship and conservation, economic sustainability, and most importantly, Mr. Speaker, true reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. We all want our natural resources sector to support reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. We know we seek the balance of environmental sustainability and economic benefits. Mr. Speaker, our government has been working towards these goals, but we know there have been huge changes in the way natural resource ministries have been set up, the way the sector has played out, and we have an incredible amount of work to do. I am very proud to be leading this ministry, very much looking forward to the work ahead, look forward to more conversations with the member opposite in the days, weeks, months, and years to come. Thank you.
Member for Skeena.
Mr. Speaker, if the BC government wants to get serious about the grave situation facing Europe and the world, there are options at its disposal. Today, two major energy companies, BP and Shell, have made the enormous decision to cancel their energy investments in Russia. $3 billion just for one company alone. Countries around the world are already taking active steps to address this threat. And they are doing that by accelerating LNG development and production. My question is to the Premier. Considering the extraordinary circumstances and the obvious need of Canadian allies, will this BC government accelerate LNG development to supply secure and ethical energy for the world?
Premier.
Well, thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I thank the official opposition for focusing on these extraordinary events that are shaping not just today, but our future going forward. And there will be upheaval in many, many sectors, as the member outlined. Certainly, energy security is now very much at risk in various parts of Europe, and indeed will have knock-on effects here in British Columbia in terms of the costs of supplies to meet our needs, not so much on the natural gas side, because we have that in abundance, but on refined products and so on, which again has been a topic of discussion in this House in previous weeks. So what I can say to the member is that British Columbia does have a storehouse of natural resources that have been, by and large, there to benefit British Columbians for many, many, many years. And it is our intention, based on the plans that we've put forward, to make sure that continues now and into the future, ensuring that we do so under the framework of a climate action plan that is world-leading, or certainly North America-leading, and I believe we need to do all of those things at the same time. Issues like Article 6, which was part and parcel of the Paris Accords, is critically important to getting other jurisdictions off more noxious forms of energy, like coal and more carbon-intensive natural gas. British Columbia can play a valuable role there, but the international community working in concert needs to come to a place where we can do that. And I'm hopeful that the premise of the member's question was just that perhaps the international community in the current crisis will understand that we have more than just the obvious crisis of a rogue dictator trampling on the rights of citizens of Ukraine, but also the consequences of climate change and a host of other initiatives that all of us collectively have to work on.
Member for Skeena supplemental.
Mr. Speaker, the crux of the question was whether or not this government will actually accelerate the development of LNG projects here in BC. Because Russia's greatest lever is the threat of cutting off energy supplies to Europe, specifically LNG. And Russia isn't going anywhere soon. The global liquefied natural gas industry is already close producing its limits. They can't produce anymore. But here in BC, we have a huge source of clean, safe, ethical LNG. Clean LNG. Even the United States declares that our LNG is clean. Right now, on the books, for the last number of years, 5 years, Niska LNG, wood fiber LNG, Heisla's Cedar LNG, Chevron's KLNG, which was recently bought by Enbridge, Skeena LNG, Totem LNG, Port Edward LNG are all projects waiting for permits. 7 LNG projects in BC that are waiting for permits here in BC, all at a time when countries are crying out for a secure source of clean and ethical LNG. My question to the Premier, what is this BC government doing to make sure BC is part of the solution in terms of energy needs for the world?
Premier.
Well, thank you, Honourable Speaker. One of the first things we did was put in place a framework for the largest private sector investment in Canadian history. I thought that would have been apparent to the member whose constituency is benefiting from that. There's a range of other initiatives, Honourable Speaker, that we're working on with our international partners and the federal government to make sure that Canada and British Columbia have a key role to play in the economic and energy future, not just here in North America, not just in Asia, but indeed in Europe as well. Events in Russia have materially changed decisions for the people of Germany, for example, who are now holding off on decommissioning their nuclear capacity. And there's a range of other initiatives that governments and peoples are going to have to make as a result of the appalling behavior of Vladimir Putin. But I think, and I hope that the member's not leaning too hard in this direction, we started this question period together, 87 people. We need to continue to focus on the problem, and the problem is Vladimir Putin.
Opposition House Leader.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. With all due respect to the Premier, and I'm sure that he would agree with this statement, the world has changed. It has changed dramatically in just the last few weeks. And so the world is looking at British Columbia and wants to know if British Columbia is going to fast-track the supply of safe, secure, and ethical natural gas to meet the needs of Germany and our other European allies. Against the backdrop of the brutal Russian invasion of Ukraine, the German Chancellor made two very bold, significant moves in recent days. Germany halted the Nord Stream 2, a natural gas pipeline that directly links Russia and Germany, and Germany has accelerated work to build two of the world's largest LNG import terminals. Now, phase 1 of LNG Canada has a capacity of 2.1 billion cubic feet per day. Phase 2 would double that capacity to 4 liquefaction trains. Mr. Speaker, our allies in Europe are urgently looking for this safe and secure energy supply, and we have those natural gas reserves here in British Columbia. So the simple question to the Premier is, will he and his government set about to immediately fast-track further capacity at LNG Canada?
Premier.
Well, thank you, Honourable Speaker. A final investment decision by the joint venture at LNG Canada has not been made. If the members are suggesting that we intervene and take an equity share, they should say so. There's nothing simple about what the member's suggesting, and he knows that. The challenges in the international community are stark, and they will be changing by the minute and by the day. So a declarative statement by the government of British Columbia on what our future energy plans are will not be helpful until we have a better understanding, first of all, where the private sector capital will be, and if it is going to be flooding in, I look forward to that. I certainly was excited about some of the opportunities that were presented when we came into government, but over the past 5 years, we've discovered, as I'm sure most people of the world have, that markets are unstable. The former administration in the United States, I think, relished destabilizing events. I see that there are, I know that the people on the other side like to quote legislators in the United States. Apparently, a couple of them think that Canada needs to have a talking to as well, based on how we're trying to conduct our affairs here. So the world's a complex place. Is it going to get more complex? Yes, it is. But what we need to do together is to hold fast with the common values that Canadians have always brought to these situations. We band together, brothers and sisters in arms, to take on the real enemy, which is Vladimir Putin.
Opposition House Leader, supplemental.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, we are doing and trying to reflect what so many British Columbians are saying, and that is they want their government to do everything it possibly can to send the strongest message possible to Vladimir Putin and the Russian authoritarian regime that their actions in Ukraine are completely unacceptable and will not be tolerated. And so today in question period, we've actually suggested two practical items, one involving the BC Investment Management Corporation, of which the government has, the government sets the investment criteria and the overall management framework. Perhaps it would be a more productive and immediate action for the government to actually update that investment management criteria and framework. And secondly, we're saying against the backdrop of significant reserves, natural gas reserves here in British Columbia, is the government prepared to step up and work with the private sector, work with these 7+ LNG projects to fast track them, to bring this secure, ethical supply of natural gas from British Columbia online. Mr. Speaker, what immediate steps is this government taking to get these LNG projects built so that Germany and our other European allies can access that safe, reliable supply of natural gas?
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Well, LNG Canada, thanks for that. LNG Canada Phase 1 began in 2018. It's 2022, and it's not done. That's 4 years. The horizon for other investments of that kind would be of a similar duration, if not longer. And again, in many instances, permits are not yet in place when I think of the inventory that the member for Skeena brought forward. I'm hopeful that the members on the other side want us to continue to certainly ensure that we're protecting the public interest by regulating this resource to the best of our ability in the interest of all British Columbians. We also recognize and understand, and I thank the member for bringing us back to a place where useful suggestions are being put forward by the members on the other side, and we will certainly look at them. We have already looked at the BCIMC question and come to the conclusion that as it stands right now, the trustees and the chief investment officers are the ones that make the decisions on when to invest or divest, and that's as it should be, to protect the literally thousands and thousands and thousands of pensioners who depend on that income and that revenue stream. But does that not give us the opportunity as legislators to stand with one voice and say we should divest? We've done that today, I think, pretty categorically, and I'm hopeful that the trustees and the management group will understand and reflect on our comments today. We also have a host of other initiatives that we're working on the federal government with, and over the course of the next number of days, I hope those will become available for all of us to fully understand. But what we've said quite clearly to Ottawa, our national government responsible for international relations, is that British Columbians, to a person, stand ready to do what we can to assist the people of Ukraine and push back Vladimir Putin. And I know that that's the sentiment and intent of the members on the other side. I don't want to make this about why are you not doing something. I know that's not the intent that's coming, but we need to watch that fine line, because oftentimes the theatrics of this place sometimes put a curtain across the real intentions of all of us, which is to stand united against a foe that we've never seen in our lifetime.
Member for Abbotsford West.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Well, it's not a day that the opposition, or I think anyone in this House, wants to see characterized by bickering and negativity. And I probably am not the only member of this chamber who is still staggered by the fact that we are using terms like allies and war and invasion in circumstances that I don't think any of us thought we would be confronted by. And British Columbians don't want their pension funds helping to finance Russia's invasion, and they are counting on the government to ensure that that doesn't happen. And to the Premier's point, if the government and the Premier and the Minister require the granting of specific powers to ensure that that doesn't happen, I think this House is of a mind to grant them those powers quickly, Mr. Speaker. You've heard people appreciate and support the symbolism of the decision to take Russian products off the shelf of our liquor stores. But the message we need to send to Vladimir Putin is not going to be delivered in an empty vodka bottle. It is going to be delivered by ships taking an alternative LNG energy supply to the countries in Europe that Mr. Putin is trying to hold hostage and trying to bully to look the other way while he conquers Ukraine. Other countries are stepping up. US, Australia, they are all increasing their LNG production. And every freedom-loving jurisdiction on the planet, no matter how big, no matter how small, can contribute to the defeat of Mr. Putin's Mr. Putin's aggression. And we all know that this province is blessed with an abundant supply and the means to contribute in a significant way to permanently removing that energy club that Mr. Putin is waving in the face of European democracies. And what we are asking, what we are signaling our support for, is for the government to act boldly, to act decisively, to act immediately, to increase BC's LNG production capacity and demonstrate to the Ukraine, demonstrate to our allies, and demonstrate to the world that British Columbians and Canadians will do more than just talk. We will take active steps and remove the single biggest lever of intimidation that Vladimir Putin possesses, Mr. Speaker. And I hope the government will take that advice seriously.
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I thank the member for Abbotsford West for his thoughtful intervention. And he and I have had discussions over now far too many years around issues like this, and we find ourselves increasingly of one mind. I think that might be frightening for him and his family. It certainly would be for mine, but nonetheless, it's the truth. In situations like this, all of our character is tested. All of our resolve needs to be on the line. And what so moved me over the weekend is tens of thousands of British Columbians coming out of their homes in communities right across the province, and Canadians from coast to coast to coast, speaking with one voice in a time of fractured politics and a time when we've never been so disunited in many, many ways. Just weeks ago, all of us were shaking our heads, concerned and questioning what had happened to the decency of Canadians, that we were at each other. And now we have a common purpose, which is to stand together, regardless of our political perspective, regardless of where we come from, regardless of how we were brought up, and speak united with one voice against Vladimir Putin and his illegal attempted occupation of a sovereign state of Ukraine. That's where we're all at. And again, I want to thank the members for their questions today. We will certainly be following up with BCIMC. It's absolutely clear the intention of the people in this House and those that we represent. But I want to caution that I don't believe it's something that we should arbitrarily say as a response to a question period, that we're going to throw out the arm's length relationship that currently exists. That's not to say we can't continue to use our influence on this side and on that side to make the message abundantly clear. When it comes to supplying energy, again, if we could do it tomorrow, that would be one thing, but we can't. The best efforts of British Columbians would not achieve what you're asking for in 3, 4, or 5 years. So instead, I think the better role for British Columbians to play is to say to the international community, we are all in this together. We have abundant opportunities to bring alternative energy online, to address climate change, and create economic and energy sovereignty for not just the people of Europe, but the people of Asia, the people of Canada, the people of North America. That's what we have at our disposal right now. Working together, responding to an international crisis, creates another opportunity to address the big international crisis that led to heat domes, people dying in hundreds from weather that we had never experienced before. We need to do all of those things at the same time. And I believe that there's enough confidence in the people in this House, all of us from our different different places with our different backgrounds, that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can stand up to a dictator, we can stand up to climate change, we can stand up to an illicit drug supply, and we can have reconciliation as well if we focus on doing it together. And the intent of the questions today from the opposition did just that, and I thank you all very much for doing it in the way that you did.
The bell ends the question period.